He was a homeless Navy SEAL veteran, carrying the memory of two soldiers he could never bring home. No family waiting, no place to belong, just a faded backpack and Rex, the aging German shepherd who had already lost one soldier and refused to abandon another. Then, in late September 2019, while walking south of Missoula, Montana, Logan stopped beside an abandoned ranch after hearing a trapped calf crying behind a broken fence. As he struggled to free it, the Montana wind suddenly roared through the barn. Rex began barking wildly. Logan looked up and saw a massive sheet of metal roofing tearing loose above him, spinning through the air directly toward where he knelt. What Rex did in the next few seconds would change their journey forever. But that was only the beginning. Days later, Logan and Rex reached the gate of Whitmore Ranch, where a 79-year-old widow had lived alone for 18 years. Logan asked for nothing but water. Before the night was over, however, Rex would hear something coming from inside the farmhouse that Logan could not. And by morning, none of their lives would be quite the same. Before we begin, if stories of faith, loyal dogs, and second chances touch your heart, please subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Late September had turned the country south of Missoula, Montana, gold and brittle. Cold wind moved through the cottonwoods, carrying the smell of dry grass, distant cattle, and the first warning that winter was already descending from the mountains. Logan Carter had been walking south for 3 days when the wind found the weak places in his coat. At 42, the former U.S. Navy SEAL still had the broad shoulders and disciplined posture of a man whose body remembered orders even when his life no longer had any. He stood about 6'1", though months of sleeping rough had hollowed his cheeks and narrowed his frame. His dark brown hair was cut short out of habit and had begun graying at the temples. A neatly trimmed beard joined his mustache, framing a weathered, sun-browned face marked by a small scar through his left eyebrow. His blue-gray eyes rarely rested anywhere for long. They had learned to measure doors, distances, strangers, and exits before they measured beauty. An old injury made his left leg drag slightly when he tired. He wore a red plaid flannel shirt beneath a worn brown canvas jacket, a gray t-shirt, dark jeans, a brown leather belt, brown hiking boots, and a scratched military watch that had survived more years than most of the things Logan owned. Nearly everything else fit inside the faded military backpack on his shoulders. Rex walked beside him without a leash. The 9-year-old German shepherd was large but beginning to show his age. Black and tan sable fur forming a dark saddle over his back, intelligent amber eyes watching the road, his muzzle touched with silver. A small scar notched the tip of his left ear. His old brown leather collar carried no decoration beyond a plain identification tag. Rex had once been a military working dog, trained to search, obey, wait, and return. Retirement had taken the uniformed purpose from his life, but not the loyalty. His first handler had been Daniel Hayes, Logan's closest friend in the unit. Daniel had been a lean, sharp-faced man with sandy brown hair, an easy grin, and the irritating gift of joking when everyone else wanted silence. He treated nervous young sailors, exhausted teammates, and stubborn dogs with the same mixture of patience and mockery. Before one deployment, Daniel had scratched Rex behind the ears and told Logan that if the dog ever retired before either of them, Logan had better make sure the idiot ends up somewhere decent. Daniel never lived to see Rex retire. Years later, Logan completed the adoption paperwork himself. Daniel was not the only dead man who followed him. Mason Reed had been heavier built, dark-haired, square-jawed, and quiet. The kind of teammate who rarely spoke but always noticed when someone else was running low on water or ammunition. During Logan's final deployment, Mason disappeared from contact while several others were badly hurt and needed immediate evacuation. Logan had been forced to choose. He chose the living. Mason never came back. The decision had been correct. That was what everyone told him. Correct decisions, Logan had discovered, could still ruin a man. After the Navy came the slower collapse. Injuries that made physical work harder, jobs that disappeared, a marriage that could not survive a husband who woke fighting ghosts, and finally an apartment he could no longer afford. For nearly 2 years, addresses had become temporary things. Rex was the only constant. At a gas station outside Missoula, Logan had heard that ranches farther south sometimes hired temporary hands to repair fence before winter. He had no telephone number, no recommendation, and no guarantee. It was still more of a destination than he had possessed the week before. 3 days into the walk, Rex suddenly stopped. What? The dog turned toward an abandoned-looking ranch beside the road. An old barn leaned beneath a patched roof. Stacks of lumber and fencing materials lay under loose tarps. Then Logan heard it. A calf bawled weakly behind a pile of broken rails. Of course you heard that. Rex followed as Logan dropped his backpack and found the young animal with one hind leg trapped between two fallen fence boards. The calf was frightened but otherwise healthy. Logan crouched, speaking softly while working the wood loose. The wind rose without warning. Rex's ears snapped upright. A sheet of corrugated roofing propped against the barn lifted like a sail. Rex barked. Logan turned too slowly. The German Shepherd launched himself against Logan's shoulder. Logan crashed sideways into the dirt as the metal sheet sliced through the space where his head had been, struck the fence, and folded around a post with a violent metallic crack. For several seconds, Logan simply stared. Then Rex whimpered. His right front paw was bleeding. Rex! Logan's fear came faster than reason. For one horrible second, he saw Daniel again, not the dog. He knelt, checked the leg carefully, and found a torn paw pad and bruising, but no obvious break. Logan emptied most of his remaining drinking water over the wound and wrapped it with gauze from the small first aid kit in his pack. Rex tried to stand. No. The dog tried again. Enough. Logan slid one arm beneath Rex's chest and another under his hindquarters. Nearly 90 pounds of shepherd came reluctantly off the ground. Rex stared at him with offended dignity. Don't make this embarrassing. Logan managed perhaps 200 yards before his old leg began burning. He put Rex down, rested, then lifted him again. You carried me enough. That evening, they stopped beneath a cottonwood. Logan spread his only blanket almost entirely over Rex and fell asleep against the trunk. Sometime during the night, Rex pulled half of it back with his teeth and pressed himself against Logan's side. In the morning, Logan found a dry cottonwood leaf resting on his chest. Rex sat beside him, holding another. Long ago, Daniel had trained him to retrieve small objects. Logan laughed, a rusty sound he had not heard from himself in days. Daniel would call that technically correct. He slipped the worthless leaf into his jacket pocket. 2 days later, Rex was walking better. Near sunset, he stopped again. Ahead stood an old wooden gate. Beyond it stretched neglected pasture, a weathered farmhouse, a leaning barn, and mountains glowing under the last orange light. An elderly woman sat alone on the veranda. Margaret Maggie Whitmore was 79, small and narrow-shouldered, with deeply lined pale skin and long silver-gray hair twisted into a practical knot. Her face had once been soft, but 18 years of solitude had sharpened it. Her hazel eyes were observant, suspicious, and tired. A metal walker stood beside her rocking chair. Her only son, Michael, had died young in 1993. Her husband, Robert, survived him until 2001. After Robert died, Maggie locked Michael's old bedroom and gradually locked most of the world outside with it. Logan stopped at the gate. Rex stared toward the house. "Nothing there for us," Logan murmured. Rex did not move. Then Maggie looked up. And somehow, before either human spoke, the injured old dog stepped toward a house where no stranger had been invited to stay in 18 years. By midnight, one of them would be lying helpless on the floor, and the other two would have to decide whether that closed gate still mattered. Morning came pale and cold over Whitmore Ranch, the kind of Montana morning that made every fence post cast a long blue shadow and every breath hang briefly in the air. Logan Carter had slept badly beneath the tarp outside the fence, though not because of the cold. Only a few hours earlier, Rex had awakened him with urgent barking after hearing Maggie fall inside the farmhouse. Logan had found the 79-year-old woman on the kitchen floor, furious at her own helplessness, and helped her back into a chair before quietly returning outside. He had not asked for anything in return. By sunrise, he had already decided to leave before gratitude could become obligation. Rex was still limping slightly on his bandaged right front paw, but the German Shepherd insisted on following him around the yard while Logan rolled the tarp, tightened the faded military backpack, and prepared to head south. Before leaving, Logan noticed the woodpile beside the house. Half the logs were too large for Maggie to lift. The chopping block leaned sideways in frozen dirt. Without asking, he found an old splitting maul near the barn and worked until a neat stack of smaller pieces stood beneath the veranda roof. His shoulder complained. His left leg stiffened. He ignored both. Next came the front step, loose enough to shift beneath Maggie's walker. Logan drove 2 salvaged nails through the board and wedged the support underneath with a piece of scrap cedar. Then he checked the well pump because he had heard it coughing during the night. He did all 3 things without telling Maggie. By 9 o'clock, he had his backpack on. Maggie appeared in the doorway with her walker, wrapped in a faded gray cardigan over a long dark dress. Her silver gray hair was pinned into the same practical knot as the day before, though several strands had escaped around her lined face. She looked less formidable in the morning light, but only slightly. "You fixed the step." Logan looked back. It was loose. And the wood. It was large. "You planning to answer every question like that?" "If possible." Maggie's mouth tightened, but something almost amused moved behind her hazel eyes. "You know fence?" "A little." "The north line is falling." Logan glanced toward the pasture. Several posts leaned like tired men after closing time. "Looks like the north line has company." Maggie followed his gaze. 3 days. Logan frowned. "What?" "You and the dog can sleep in the barn for 3 days. Fix the north fence. After that, you leave." Logan looked at Rex. Rex sat down. "That's supposed to be a vote?" The dog blinked. Maggie tapped the walker against the veranda boards. "I'm not running a hotel." "No, ma'am. And I'm not feeding a grown man for free." "I didn't ask." "Good, because I wasn't offering." Logan almost smiled. 3 days. 3 days. The barn smelled of dust, old hay, leather, and rain that had leaked through the roof for years. Logan cleared a dry corner, spread his tarp over the floor, and made Rex a bed from an old horse blanket he found hanging over a stall. By the end of the first day, 4 north fence posts were upright. By the second, 8. By sunset on the third, the entire section stood straighter than it had in years. Logan packed again the following morning. Maggie came outside. "The barn roof leaks." He looked up. "I noticed." "The western side." "I noticed that too." Maggie waited. Logan slowly lowered the backpack. 3 days became 6. On the 7th morning, Maggie announced that the well pump sounded wrong. Logan stared at her. "It sounded wrong before I got here." "Then you've had a week to think about it." 2 weeks passed before either of them realized no one had mentioned leaving. Whitmore Ranch began changing in small, almost embarrassed ways. Logan patched the barn roof with salvaged tin, replaced rotten trough boards, cleared a path between the house and well, and restrung wire along the lower pasture. He found 2 thin cattle that had been ranging wild along the back acreage and coaxed them into the repaired field with grain borrowed from a neighboring feed shed. Rex established his own schedule. He followed Logan every morning, nose low as if supervising construction. Around noon, he abandoned him. Logan found him one afternoon stretched beside Maggie's rocking chair on the veranda, his silvering muzzle resting across her boot. "You're a traitor." Rex did not move. Maggie scratched behind his ear. "He has better judgment than you." "I thought you didn't like dogs." "I don't." Rex's tail thumped once, "especially smug ones." That evening, Logan discovered a piece of roast beef in Rex's bowl. He said nothing. Neither did Maggie. Several days later, Logan was sorting scrap metal inside the barn when a narrow steel plate slipped from his hands. It struck the concrete floor with a violent crack. Rex dropped instantly. His belly hit the ground. His ears flattened. His whole body began trembling. Logan froze. He knew that posture. He had seen it years ago when distant thunder sounded too much like something else. He lowered himself slowly beside Rex. No commands. No reassurance spoken too quickly. Just a hand laid flat over the dog's chest. The heartbeat beneath his palm was racing. "I know," Logan whispered. Rex pressed closer. Maggie stood unseen in the barn doorway. Later, when Rex was asleep near the stove, she asked, "You saved him?" Logan looked at the old dog. "No." Maggie waited. "We take turns." She said nothing after that. A week later, near 3 in the morning, Maggie woke thirsty. On her way to the kitchen, she heard something from the barn. A man shouting, "Mason!" Then silence. Then another broken word. Maggie moved toward the window. Inside the barn, Logan was thrashing beneath his blanket. Rex stood over him, one front paw pressed against Logan's chest. The dog leaned his whole body down. Logan jerked awake. For several seconds, his hands searched for something that was not there. Then his breathing slowed. He touched Rex's neck. "I'm here." Maggie stepped away before Logan could see her. The next morning, a metal coffee pot sat outside the barn door. Logan carried it to the veranda. "You made too much." Maggie kept rocking. "I misjudged." "You never misjudge coffee." "Don't argue with someone who gives you coffee." Logan poured a cup. Rex lay between them. No one said anything for a while, yet something had changed. Maggie no longer saw only a homeless man sleeping in her barn. Logan no longer saw only a bitter old widow waiting for the years to finish, and neither of them seemed willing to admit that the old German shepherd stretched between their chairs had already begun turning two strangers into something dangerously close to family. That afternoon, while Logan repaired a gate near the house, Rex suddenly left him again. But this time he did not go to Maggie. He stopped in front of a locked door at the back of the farmhouse and began to whine. By December, winter had buried the Bitterroot Valley beneath snow, and Whitmore Ranch seemed cut away from the rest of Montana, its fences white, its barn roof silver with frost, and the mountains beyond it almost disappearing into the pale sky. Logan Carter had been at the ranch nearly 4 months. The arrangement that had begun as 3 days had quietly become something neither he nor Maggie discussed. His faded backpack no longer remained packed beside his bed in the barn. His shaving things occupied a shelf. His spare shirt hung from a nail. Rex had acquired a blanket near the farmhouse stove, and another in the barn, as though the old German shepherd had decided that belonging to 2 rooms was perfectly reasonable. Yet one part of the farmhouse remained untouched. At the end of the narrow hallway stood a closed wooden door with an old brass knob. Logan had noticed it during his first weeks but never asked about it. He understood closed doors. Some were locked with keys. Others were locked with names. Rex was less respectful of human arrangements. Whenever he passed the hallway, he slowed near the door and sniffed beneath it. One snowy afternoon, he sat directly in front of it and gave a low whine. "Rex." The dog glanced at Logan but remained seated. From the kitchen came the scrape of Maggie's walker. The moment she saw him there, her expression changed. "Get him away from there." Her voice was sharper than Logan had ever heard it. Rex lowered his ears. Logan did not ask why. "Come on, buddy." He led Rex outside and spent the afternoon splitting kindling until darkness settled across the ranch. He knew what anger built over grief sounded like. He had heard it in his own voice often enough. That evening, Maggie noticed a lantern burning inside the barn. She had intended only to tell Logan that the temperature would fall below 0, but through the partly open door, she saw him sitting on an overturned crate with Rex beside him. Something small hung between Logan's fingers, a metal identification tag. Maggie entered slowly. "Whose is it?" Logan looked down. Stamped into the metal was a name, Daniel Hayes. For a moment, Logan considered putting it away. Instead, he rubbed his thumb across the worn letters. Rex's first handler. Maggie remained near the door. Logan told her more than he intended. Daniel had been his closest friend in the teams, the sort of man who could make exhausted men laugh when nobody had energy left for humor. Rex had belonged to Daniel before he ever belonged to Logan. Daniel had trusted the dog with his life, and he had trusted Logan with something almost as important. If Rex ever reached retirement, someone would make sure he had somewhere decent to grow old. Daniel never came home. Rex eventually did. When he retired, I took him. Maggie looked at the shepherd lying with his head across Logan's boot. "Because you promised?" "At first. And afterward." Logan scratched Rex behind one ear. "Afterward, I think he kept me." The silence lengthened. Then Maggie asked, "Mason?" Logan's hand stopped. She had heard that name during his nightmares, but had never asked before. Mason Reed had been one of Logan's teammates, a broad-built, square-jawed man with dark hair and a reserved nature that strangers sometimes mistook for coldness. He rarely wasted words, but he remembered birthdays, checked other men's water before his own, and once spent half a night repairing another sailor's equipment without telling him. During Logan's final deployment, Mason lost contact while several wounded teammates needed immediate evacuation. Logan had been responsible for the decision. Go back for one man whose condition was unknown, or move the wounded men already beside him. He chose the wounded. They survived. Mason did not return. "I made the right decision," Logan said. Maggie waited. That's the part I can't live with." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "Why?" "Because if it had been wrong, I could hate the mistake." He looked toward the snowy darkness beyond the barn. "But it was right, and he still died." Maggie lowered herself onto another crate. "You think Daniel wanted you dead with him?" Logan's jaw tightened. "You think Mason did?" "Don't. Or did you decide for both of them that surviving means you owe the dead the rest of your life?" Logan stood so abruptly Rex lifted his head. "You don't know anything about it?" "No," Maggie said. "I know something worse." That stopped him. Her gaze moved toward the farmhouse. "My son Michael was 24 when he died in 1993. Michael Whitmore had been Maggie and Robert's only child. A tall, long-limbed young man with Robert's brown eyes, thick chestnut hair, and a crooked smile that appeared whenever he knew he was about to annoy his mother. He had been restless, affectionate, stubborn, and forever leaving books open face down despite Maggie warning him it ruined the bindings. His death had turned the farmhouse quiet, but Robert Whitmore had kept Maggie from sealing the grief away completely. Robert had been a broad-handed rancher with a weathered face, thinning brown-gray hair, and a patient temperament strengthened by decades of working livestock and living beside a woman more stubborn than himself. After Michael died, Robert sometimes sat silently on their son's bed while Maggie dusted the room. They rarely spoke there. They did not need to. Each remembered the same boy. Then Robert died in 2001. "The first time I went to Michael's room afterward," Maggie said, "I realized there was nobody left who remembered him the way I did. So she closed the door, turned the key, and left it locked for 18 years. A week passed after that conversation. Then one morning, Maggie appeared in the hallway holding a small blackened key. Logan said nothing. "I want to open it myself." He stood behind her. Rex sat beside his leg. The key resisted. Maggie tried again, both hands trembling around it. Metal scraped inside the lock. Then something yielded. The door moved inward. Dust floated through a blade of winter sunlight. A narrow bed stood beneath the window. Baseball books occupied a shelf. A worn glove rested on a dresser beside several family photographs. An old brown jacket still hung from a wall hook, as if its owner might return for it after supper. Maggie stopped breathing for a moment. Rex entered first. He sniffed once, walked to the bed, and quietly lay down beside it. Maggie crossed the room with her walker and lowered herself onto the mattress. Her fingers touched the baseball glove, then Michael's jacket. Finally, they settled on Rex's silvering head. Logan remained in the doorway. He understood there was nothing to fix, no fence to straighten, no roof to patch, no correct sentence that could return a son, a husband, Daniel Hayes, or Mason Reed. So he sat on the floor outside the room and stayed. The next morning, Logan passed through the hallway carrying firewood. He stopped. Michael's door was still open. Rex was asleep inside, and Maggie was sitting beside the window with an old photograph resting in her hands. She had not locked the door again. For the first time since Logan arrived, he understood that Whitmore Ranch was not the only thing being repaired, and perhaps Maggie was not the only one. By the spring of 2020, snow had withdrawn from the Bitterroot Valley, exposing dark earth, new grass, and a Whitmore Ranch that no longer looked as though it had been waiting patiently to disappear. The north fence stood straight again. The pasture had been cleared of dead brush. The well pump ran without coughing, and the 2 cattle Logan had recovered from the neglected back acreage now grazed inside repaired fencing. Even the barn looked different, its worst roof leaks patched and its sagging doors rehung. Maggie noticed something else changing too. Logan no longer worked like a man paying off a debt. He worked like a man who expected to see tomorrow's problems. He kept spare fence staples because they would be needed later. He sharpened tools before putting them away. He planted potatoes beside the farmhouse after Maggie told him the soil there was useless, apparently for the pleasure of proving an elderly woman wrong. Rex followed him each morning, his 9-year-old body slower than it had once been, but still powerful. Then abandoned Logan around noon to sleep beside Maggie's rocking chair. People noticed. Richard Cole arrived one bright April morning on horseback. At 58, Richard owned one of the larger cattle operations south of Missoula. He was tall and heavy through the shoulders, with a square, sun-reddened face, iron-gray hair, a trimmed gray mustache, and pale brown eyes, accustomed to estimating acreage before admiring scenery. He was not a cruel man. In fact, most neighbors considered him fair, but 30 years of surviving droughts, cattle prices, bank loans, and thin margins had trained him to translate almost everything into numbers. Land was pasture capacity, water was value, a fence was an expense. Sentiment was something people could afford after the mortgage was paid. Maggie received him on the veranda. "I hear you've got the place working again," Richard said. "I hear people around here still gossip. They do it for free, hard to compete with." Maggie almost smiled. Richard eventually explained why he had come. Whitmore Ranch's 24 acres bordered land he had been trying to consolidate, and he was prepared to pay well above what Maggie might expect for property in its condition. She could keep the farmhouse for the rest of her life. He would maintain the access road, pay the taxes, and assume responsibility for the acreage. "You'd never have to worry about this place again." "I'm not worried about it." Richard glanced toward the pasture. Logan was replacing a brace post, his sleeves rolled above his forearms while Rex rested beside the open tool bag. Richard's expression tightened slightly. "You know what people are going to say. I've survived people talking before. A homeless man arrives, stays on an elderly widow's property, repairs it for her. He saved me from my kitchen floor. That doesn't tell you what he wants." Maggie turned her eyes toward Logan. Richard followed her gaze. "Do you really know?" "Yes." "What?" Maggie watched Logan straighten the post, step backward, inspect it, then adjust it again because nearly straight apparently offended him personally. "A place where he can wake up tomorrow without having to leave." Richard studied her. Perhaps he expected argument. Maggie gave him none. Finally, he put his hat back on. "Offer stands." "My answer does too." He left without anger. The next visitor was different. Kevin Whitmore arrived several weeks later in a dusty sedan. He was Robert's 46-year-old nephew, a lean man of average height with thinning, sandy brown hair combed carefully across his scalp, a narrow face, pale skin, and a neatly clipped goatee that made his mouth seem permanently pursed. He sold used agricultural equipment around western Montana and had developed the smooth politeness of someone who preferred conversations in which something could eventually be bought. Kevin had visited Maggie only a handful of times since Robert's death. Distance had become his excuse first, work second, and eventually no excuse had been necessary because silence had turned into habit. Now Whitmore Ranch had value again. Kevin found Logan repairing a hinge outside the barn. "So you're Carter?" Logan looked up. "Depends who's asking." "Kevin Whitmore. Robert was my uncle." Logan wiped his hands on a rag. "Maggie's inside. I came to talk to you." That made Rex lift his head. Kevin glanced at the dog, then returned his attention to Logan. "How much?" "For what?" "To leave." Logan said nothing. Kevin gave a restrained smile. "Come on, everybody wants something." "You should probably ask Maggie what I want." "I'm asking you." Logan set the wrench down. Kevin stepped closer. "You had nothing before you came here. Now you sleep on 24 acres owned by a woman pushing 80. You really expect people not to notice?" Logan's face remained still, but the words found their target. Kevin did not know it. That made them worse. He eventually left without receiving an answer. That night, Logan sat on the edge of his cot in the barn and packed his faded military backpack, shirt, first aid kit, water bottle, Daniel's dog tag. Everything fit too easily. That frightened him more than Kevin had. For years, Logan had developed a simple survival rule. Leave before belonging became loss. Jobs, apartments, friendships. Whenever something began to matter, some hidden part of him began looking for the exit. Daniel had disappeared. Mason had disappeared. His marriage had collapsed. Civilian life had stripped away everything else. Somewhere along the way, Logan had stopped believing permanence was something offered to men like him. He shouldered the backpack. Rex, the German shepherd, was lying near the veranda. "Come on." Rex looked at him. "Come." The command was unmistakable. Rex did not move. Logan approached. "Seriously." Rex lowered his head onto his paws. The farmhouse door opened. Maggie stepped onto the veranda with her walker. Her eyes went immediately to the backpack. "Looks like he's made his decision. He's my dog. Then perhaps your dog is waiting for you to make yours." Logan looked toward the gate. Beyond it was the road south. He knew roads. Roads required nothing except movement. No promises, no explanations, no possibility of waking one morning to discover that another person had become important enough to lose. Maggie did not ask him to stay. That mattered. Rex simply remained where he was. Logan remembered the night beneath the cottonwood when he had covered Rex with their only blanket and awakened to find half of it pulled back over himself. He remembered Rex running on an injured paw to find Maggie. He remembered Daniel's promise, Mason's absence. 4 months of fences, coffee, nightmares, arguments, and a locked bedroom finally opened after 18 years. Maybe staying did not guarantee that nothing would be lost. Maybe it only meant deciding something was worth losing. Logan slowly removed the backpack. He placed it beside the veranda. Rex's tail struck the boards once. "Traitor," Logan muttered. From behind him, Maggie said, "Good dog." But long after Logan returned to the barn, Maggie remained awake. Kevin's visit had exposed something she had refused to consider. Logan could repair every fence on Whitmore Ranch and still own none of the ground beneath his boots. If she died tomorrow, a relative who had ignored her for years could arrive with paperwork and send him back through that gate. Near midnight, Maggie opened an old cabinet in her bedroom and pulled out a wooden document box she had not touched since Robert died. Inside were tax receipts, boundary maps, Robert's papers, Michael's birth certificate, and the deed to 24 acres carrying the Whitmore name. Maggie sat beside the box for a long time. She did not write a will that night. She did something smaller. For the first time in 18 years, she began reading what would happen to Whitmore Ranch after she was gone. Summer settled over the Bitterroot Valley in long golden evenings, and by July 2020, Logan Carter had been at Whitmore Ranch for nearly a year. The land looked alive again, but Maggie Whitmore was beginning, quietly, to fade. The fall happened on a warm afternoon. Maggie had decided she could walk farther than Logan believed she should, which was exactly the sort of disagreement she preferred settling without informing him. She took her walker toward the rear pasture to inspect a section of fence Logan had repaired. She made it farther than expected before one leg weakened beneath her. The walker twisted. Maggie fell sideways into the tall grass and could not rise. She tried once, then stopped. Years earlier, she might have dragged herself until her hands bled rather than admit defeat. This time, she simply lay beneath the enormous Montana sky and waited. Rex found her. The old German shepherd had been wandering between the barn and pasture. He sniffed Maggie's face, circled her once, then looked toward the distant fence line where Logan was working. Maggie touched his silvering muzzle. "Go get your stubborn man." Rex ran. Nearly half a mile away, Logan was replacing wire when Rex appeared at a pace his aging joints rarely tolerated anymore. The dog seized Logan's sleeve gently between his teeth and pulled. "What?" Rex released him, moved several yards toward the farmhouse, then turned back. Logan dropped the pliers. When he found Maggie in the grass, fear struck him so quickly that for an instant the pasture disappeared and another place threatened to replace it, a place where people lay still and seconds mattered. He knelt. "Maggie," her eyes opened. "Can you move your legs?" "Yes." "Head?" "Didn't hit it." He slid an arm behind her shoulders. He expected the familiar protest. Instead, Maggie looked directly at him. "Help me." 2 ordinary words. Logan froze for half a heartbeat. The woman he had first met nearly a year earlier would rather have spent 4 hours on the ground than say them. "All right," he whispered. He lifted her carefully and carried her toward the farmhouse while Rex walked beside them, repeatedly looking up as if counting both humans. Dr. Samuel Harris arrived from Missoula that evening. He was a 53-year-old physician with a lean build, thinning salt and pepper hair, rectangular glasses, and the permanently tired eyes of a rural doctor who had spent 25 years driving long distances because elderly patients often refused to come to him. He spoke gently, but without decorating unpleasant truths. Maggie had suffered no serious injury from the fall. That was the good news. The rest was harder. Her heart was weakening. So was the rest of her. There was no dramatic disease to defeat, no operation promising another decade. She was nearly 80, and her body was becoming tired. "A year?" Logan asked quietly after Maggie had fallen asleep. Dr. Harris looked toward the bedroom. "Maybe. More. Maybe less." Life at Whitmore Ranch changed after that. Logan cooked meals badly until he learned to cook them less badly. He brought water, arranged Maggie's medicines, helped her from bed to the rocking chair, and quietly coordinated with a neighboring woman who came to help Maggie bathe so Maggie could keep the dignity of not having Logan perform every intimate task. Rex almost abandoned the barn completely. Some nights Maggie woke to find him sleeping beside her bed. "Your owner is outside." Rex remained still. "I'm not dead yet." His tail thumped once. Maggie laughed into the darkness. One evening, Logan sat beside her veranda chair while sunset burned copper across the mountains. For reasons he could not explain, he finally spoke about Mason without stopping halfway. "The worst part isn't that he died." Maggie waited. "I got the others out." His voice roughened. "They lived because I didn't go back." Maggie understood. "There are days you wish you had." Logan stared across the pasture. "Yes." "If you had gone back and died with Mason, at least I wouldn't have had to live with it." Maggie turned toward Rex, asleep between them. "And him." Logan frowned. "Daniel left Rex behind," she said. "Then you wanted to leave him behind too?" "That's not what I meant." "Isn't it?" Logan said nothing. "You've spent half your life standing in front of graves, asking why you were allowed to keep breathing." Her old hand settled on Rex's head. "Maybe this dog knew the answer before you did." "What answer?" "Because someone still needed you to come home." Logan looked away before she could see his eyes. Several days later, Maggie told him she needed to go to Missoula. She did not explain why. Thomas Bennett's law office occupied the second floor of an old brick building downtown. Bennett was 61, tall but slightly stooped, with silver hair combed neatly backward, a narrow, angular face, clean-shaven jaw, and calm blue eyes. 3 decades of estate disputes had given him a cautious temperament and a particular suspicion of sudden generosity involving elderly landowners. Maggie asked Logan to wait outside. Inside, she told Bennett what she wanted. Whitmore Ranch, all 24 acres, the farmhouse, barn, well, and associated property would pass to Logan Carter upon her death. Bennett questioned her carefully. "How long have you known him?" "Almost a year." "Has he asked about your will?" "No." "Asked what the property is worth?" "No." "Asked to be paid?" "Not once." Maggie leaned forward. "He lived here almost a year without knowing whether tomorrow I might tell him to leave. That answers every question I have." Dr. Harris later provided written confirmation that Maggie understood her property, her relationships, and the consequences of her decisions. Then Maggie wrote a letter in her own hand. Logan knew none of it. Kevin did. Weeks later, he filed a petition questioning Maggie's mental capacity and suggesting that a formerly homeless stranger had gained improper influence over an isolated elderly widow. Maggie's response was simple: "Take me to court." At the courthouse, she sat before the magistrate with her walker beside her and Logan several feet behind. Kevin was there too. So were neighbors who had known the Whitmores for decades. Maggie spoke without notes. She described 18 years alone. She described falling before Logan arrived and having nobody to call. She described the homeless veteran who had slept beyond her fence because she had not invited him inside. She described the injured German shepherd who had heard her fall that first night. Then she described the pasture. "This summer I fell again," Maggie said. "Rex found me. He ran nearly half a mile for Logan." Her gaze shifted toward Logan. "You call him homeless?" The room became silent. "When I was lying on the ground, that homeless man carried me home." Then she pointed toward Rex, waiting quietly beside the bench. "And that dog went to find him." Kevin could produce suspicion, but not incapacity. Dr. Harris's evaluation supported Maggie's competence, and her answers made clear that she understood exactly what she was doing. The challenge failed. Outside the courthouse, Logan helped Maggie toward the truck. He had spent years believing being unwanted was safer. Now he understood Maggie considered him something else entirely, family, and somehow that frightened him almost as much as the knowledge that one day he would lose her. Autumn came early to the Bitterroot Valley in 2020, turning the cottonwoods along the creek yellow and laying frost across Whitmore Ranch before sunrise. By October, Maggie Whitmore no longer had enough strength to cross her bedroom without help. Logan moved from the barn into the farmhouse without discussing it with her. He carried in his clothes, shaving kit, Daniel's dog tag, and finally the faded military backpack that had once contained everything he owned. He slept in the small room across the hall. Rex established his own arrangement. Every evening, the old German shepherd lowered himself in front of Maggie's bedroom door, his black and tan body stretched across the hallway like a sentry who had assigned himself one final watch. One night, Logan woke without knowing why. Rex was standing beside his bed. The dog did not bark or whine. He simply stared. Logan sat up. "All right." Maggie was awake when they entered her room. Her face had grown thinner during the previous weeks, and her white hair lay loose against the pillow, yet her eyes remained clear. "Knew he'd fetch you," she whispered. Logan sat beside her. Rex rested his muzzle on the mattress. For several minutes, Maggie watched them. "Do you still think you're homeless?" Logan looked toward the window. "I don't know." "That means yes." "What makes a home?" Then Maggie breathed carefully before answering. "A home isn't something you own." "Then what is it?" "It's where somebody notices you haven't come back." Logan lowered his eyes. Maggie touched Rex's ear. "This fool understood it before either of us." Outside, darkness was beginning to thin. "Open the window." "It's cold." "I've survived Montana longer than you have." Logan opened it a few inches. Cold air entered, carrying the smell of damp grass and wood smoke. Beyond the glass, the mountains slowly emerged from darkness. Maggie watched the light. "When you arrived, I thought you came here because you didn't have a home." Logan returned to her bedside. "Later I figured it out. I had a home. I just didn't have a family anymore." Her fingers found his hand. "And somehow, a half-dead ranch, a stubborn veteran, and an old dog solved each other's problems. Rex isn't that old." Rex's silver muzzle remained on the mattress. Maggie looked at him. "Take care of this idiot." Logan laughed, despite the tears burning his eyes. Daniel said almost the same thing. "Then Daniel sounds smarter than you." That was the last joke Maggie Whitmore ever made. The eastern sky turned pale gold. Her breathing became shallower. Logan held her hand. His other rested on Rex's head. There was no dramatic final breath, no last struggle. Maggie simply exhaled, paused, and did not breathe again. Logan remained there. Rex did too. For 18 years, Maggie had lived alone. She did not die alone. The funeral was held at Whitmore Ranch several days later. Neighbors filled the yard and veranda. Richard Cole came wearing a dark jacket instead of ranch clothes. After most people had moved toward their vehicles, he found Logan beside the barn. "I owe you something," Richard said. Logan waited. "An apology." "You don't." "I thought you wanted her land." Richard looked toward the farmhouse. "Turns out you just wanted her alive." Logan could not answer that. Kevin Whitmore came as well. He remained near the edge of the gathering, dressed in a dark suit that fit awkwardly across his shoulders. He brought no papers and made no argument. Once his eyes met Logan's. Kevin lowered his gaze first. When everyone was gone, the silence returned. It was unbearable. That evening, Logan took the faded backpack from his room. Rex watched him pack. "She's gone," Logan said. That was all the explanation he could manage. At sunrise, they walked through the gate. Rex followed, not because the ranch meant nothing to him, but because Logan was walking away, and following Logan was what Rex had always done. Logan did not recognize the pattern. Maggie would have. Daniel died, and Logan carried the guilt. Mason disappeared, and Logan carried the question. His marriage ended, his civilian life collapsed, and Logan kept moving. Every time love became grief, he treated distance as medicine. 2 days later, Thomas Bennett found him at a roadside campground south of Missoula after checking places Logan had once mentioned using when he had nowhere else to sleep. "You're difficult to find," Bennett said. "I wasn't trying to be found." "I know." At Bennett's office, Logan sat with Rex beside his chair. The lawyer opened a file. "Maggie Whitmore left you Whitmore Ranch. The 24 acres, farmhouse, barn, well, livestock, equipment, and associated property." Logan stood immediately. "No." Bennett removed his glasses. "No, I won't take it." The lawyer sighed. "She predicted that, almost word for word." He reached for an envelope. "She asked me to read this if you tried to refuse." Logan remained standing. Bennett unfolded several pages covered in Maggie's uneven handwriting. "Logan, if you're hearing this, you're probably trying to leave. Sit down." Bennett looked over the paper. Logan stared at him, then slowly sat. The letter explained that Maggie had not left him the ranch because he repaired her fences, restored the well, recovered her cattle, cooked her meals, or carried her when her legs stopped carrying her. She left it because he had lived on her land for almost a year without once asking what he might receive from it. Then Bennett reached a line that made his voice soften. Blood tells you where you came from. Family is who comes when you fall. Logan covered his mouth. Rex pressed against his leg. Bennett continued, and don't be stupid enough to think the ranch belongs entirely to you. It belongs to Rex first. He found me when I fell. He found you when I needed you. And when you tried to run, he had enough sense to stay put. The two of you have simply been too stubborn to understand what he already knew. A sound escaped Logan somewhere between laughter and grief. He lowered his hand onto Rex's head. For years, every loss had taught him the same lesson. Leave. Maggie had spent her final year teaching him another. Return. Logan looked down at the old German shepherd. Rex placed his muzzle across Logan's knee. We're going home. The road south from Missoula lay bright beneath a cold Montana sky when Logan Carter and Rex began the journey back to Whitmore Ranch. For the first time in years, Logan was not walking away from something. He was going home. Less than an hour outside the city, they passed two county road workers repairing a drainage shoulder. One was Caleb Warren, 54, broad-chested, with a weathered red face, short gray hair, and a thick mustache. 27 years working Montana roads had made him cautious around weather, machinery, and strangers, but generous with animals. His younger partner, Evan Brooks, 31, was tall and lean, with dark blonde hair, a clean-shaven, angular face, and the quick humor of a man who still believed most bad days could be improved with coffee. Caleb filled a plastic bowl from their water cooler and set it down for Rex. Beautiful shepherd. Logan glanced at the old dog drinking. Don't tell him. His ego's bad enough. Evan laughed. Logan and Rex continued south. 40 minutes later, Rex slowed beside a pile of weathered lumber near an abandoned fence line. Then Logan heard it, a dry, mechanical rattling. Rex! The German shepherd had already stepped too close. Between two gray boards lay a coiled rattlesnake. Rex! Logan lunged, grabbed Rex's collar, and pulled him backward. The snake struck. Pain punched through Logan's lower leg. He stumbled away. Rex barked furiously, but Logan dragged him farther before dropping to one knee. His first thought was not the bite. He ran both hands over Rex, legs, chest, neck, muzzle, nothing. No bite. Logan released a breath. Good. Only then did he look at the two punctures above his boot. It got me, not you. He moved away from the snake and started toward the county workers. At first, walking seemed possible. Then the pain intensified. Swelling spread around the bite. Sweat formed despite the cool air. His leg became heavy, and dizziness began turning the road strangely distant. Rex stayed pressed against him. Logan made several hundred yards before his knee struck the dirt. Rex, go! The dog stood beside him. Go find someone. Rex lowered himself to the ground. Of course. After years of being told not to abandon his handler, the old dog had apparently decided this was the worst order Logan had ever given. Logan's vision blurred. He reached into the faded backpack and found Daniel Hayes' dog tag. For years he had carried it, because letting go felt too much like betrayal. His hands shook as he clipped it to Rex's worn leather collar. Daniel brought you to me. Rex stared into his face. Logan held the shepherd's head between both hands. Now go. Something in his voice changed. Rex stood, then ran. He did not search blindly. He followed the road back to the last people he had seen. Caleb noticed him first. Where's your guy? Rex barked, ran several yards, returned, barked again. Evan straightened. That's the veteran's dog. Rex ran south once more. This time, both men followed. They found Logan on the roadside, barely responsive, one hand pressed against his swollen leg. Caleb called emergency services, while Evan kept Logan still and conscious until help arrived. Later in the hospital, a physician told Logan that a much longer delay in treatment could have changed the outcome considerably. Logan's first clear question was simpler. Where's my dog? When Rex was finally brought to him, the shepherd pushed his muzzle against the side of the bed. Logan scratched behind his silvered ears. I take one bite for you, and you think we're even. Rex licked his hand. Logan smiled weakly. Not even close. Weeks later, they reached Whitmore Ranch. The gate stood exactly where it always had. Maggie's rocking chair remained on the veranda. But Maggie was gone. Logan stopped. Daniel's dog tag still hung from Rex's collar. He reached to remove it, then changed his mind. Daniel had left Rex behind. Rex had kept Logan alive. Maggie had left them a home. For most of his adult life, Logan had believed the dead pulled him backward. Standing before Whitmore Ranch, he understood they could also point the way forward. He opened the gate. No invitation was required this time. "Come on, buddy." They went home. Over the following years, Logan turned the barn into a small repair workshop. He fixed farm equipment, fencing, furniture, and machinery for neighboring ranches. The income kept Whitmore Ranch running. Then struggling veterans began appearing. At first there was one, then another. Logan offered work, food, a bunk, and a simple rule. No one had to explain what had happened to them before being allowed beneath the roof. Rex grew old beside him. His muzzle turned almost white. He stopped following Logan across every field and spent more afternoons sleeping beside Maggie's rocking chair. 4 years later, at nearly 14, Rex could not stand. One morning, Logan understood immediately. This time he did not run from loss. He lay on the barn floor beside Rex and stayed. "Daniel gave you to me." His hand moved slowly through the old dog's fur. Logan looked at Daniel's tag still hanging from the collar. "I think we got it wrong." His voice broke. "He gave me to you." Rex died with his head resting on Logan's arm. Logan removed Daniel's tag but did not bury it. He placed it inside a wooden box in the farmhouse with Rex's collar, Maggie's letter, and the dry cottonwood leaf Rex had brought him years earlier. Rex was buried on the hill overlooking the gate. The wooden marker read, "Only Rex he found home first." Years passed. One autumn evening, Logan, now in his 50s, sat in Maggie's rocking chair and saw a younger man standing outside the gate. The stranger was thin, dusty, carrying an old backpack, and looked exhausted enough to have forgotten where he was going. He did not enter. Logan walked down. "Sir," the man said, "I just need some water." Logan smiled. "That's what I said too." He opened the gate wider. "Come on in. There's a place for you here." Before returning to the farmhouse, Logan looked toward Rex's hill. Maggie had once possessed a house without a family. Logan had once possessed a dog without a home. Rex had lost his first soldier and spent the rest of his life making certain the second one always found his way back. Logan finally understood what all three of them had spent years learning. Family was not always blood. Family was who noticed when you fell, who came back, and home was the place where someone still waited for you to return. Sometimes God's miracles do not arrive with thunder. Sometimes they come as a faithful dog, an open gate, or someone who chooses to stay when everyone else is gone. Logan, Maggie, and Rex remind us that family is not always blood, and home is not always a place. Sometimes home is simply where someone is waiting for you to return. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone you love, leave a comment, and subscribe for more stories of faith, loyalty, and second chances. May God bless you, your family, and every faithful companion walking beside you.